Hi, I'm Jen Kelly with New Initiatives Marketing. Today's newsletter is all about podcasting. Should you podcast? Should you start a podcast for your business? A couple things I'll go through in this issue is what does it take to start a podcast? What do you do to try out a podcast? What do you do with the technical things? And then a couple of other suggestions in case you don't want to take the whole thing about podcasting upon yourself, and there might be some other ways to do it. So let's dig into that. First, podcasting. Should your company do a podcast? I guess the first thing you have to ask is, why do you want to do a podcast? Is it because your company, you guys have a distinct point of view? You have something unique to say? You have multiple great conversations with different customers, and you feel like if you could get this information out on scale, that would be really beneficial for more people? Those are all valid reasons for starting a podcast for sure. The other thing to do is to not let either the number of podcasts or the limited number of podcasts in your area deter you. So, for example, if there's already 100 podcasts in the area that you are thinking of starting a podcast in, that's not necessarily a reason to not start yours. And similarly, if there's, one to none in the area, the subject matter that you want to start a podcast, that's not a deterrent either. So, with that out of the way, how do you get started? So, podcasts run in episodes, and episodes can be as short as 5 minutes, as long as 3 hours. So, the best thing to do is commit to a certain number of episodes to get started. It can be so fun and enthusiastic to get started with your first episode, but really, if you're going to try this out and take it on, commit to something like 6 or 10 episodes and then see what it's like after that. That will give you the rhythm to get into, to understanding how much prep is involved. How often should you do it? Can you really commit to such a thing? Do you really enjoy it? When are you going to schedule it into your time to actually produce all your episodes? So commit to a certain number, and then after that's over, just figure out, you know what, we're going to go forward with this, we're not going to go forward with it. Another thing to consider is the technical aspects of podcasting. So you can do video podcasts, audio podcasts. You don't have to do both at the same time. Obviously, podcasting is audio, so you got to have audio for sure. Video would be an option for you. So how do you make sure everything audio-wise works? Yes, you can set up with a laptop and a really good microphone. But what happens if you're having a little bit of trouble getting that going? Do you know how to troubleshoot? Do you have someone on your team that can troubleshoot it? If you're going to have a podcast that is just you talking, it's only you that has to be worried and concerned about, the technical aspects of everything working. If you've got guests or other folks coming in on a panel, you got to make sure that everybody either can be, technically savvy on their own to troubleshoot any problems, or if you're going to be the host, you got to make sure that folks can lean on you for any kind of technical problems they may have. And then for your podcast, it's not only just recording it, it's the sound engineering afterwards. So anything from, okay, where are we going to slice at the front and slice the end to make sure, some of our rambles as we got started are cut out. Are we going to have music or an introduction on the front, on the end, all the way through to, are you going to have certain things edited out? You'll notice yourself, and you'll notice if you have any guests or panelists, we all tend to have some crutch words that we use without even knowing it. And when you're listening to a podcast, that can get quite distracting. So crutch words such as like, so, you know what I mean? So if you're listening to that as the listener, and the person that you're interviewing is always going on these crutch words, that could be something that you want to edit out. So are you going to send your podcast for any kind of sound editing? How much is that going to cost? What's the lead time on that? Where are you going to set it up? So really having the technical stuff figured out is something that you got to think about. The other thing is going to be the time commitment. How long are you prepared to do this for? And then how long is it going to take you to do the podcast? Are you going to run right through and, time cap it at 15, 20 minutes? Are you going to run through and just see where the conversation goes? Are you going to redo it if you end up messing up in the middle of it? Or are you just going to keep going? So you got to be prepared to decide what to do there. If you're going to do it solo, that's one thing. If you're going to interview guests, that's another. So you're going to have to figure out How much lead time do I need to have guests come on? How do I prep them? How do we make sure that we have, enough time to get a good interview happening? If on another way you're going to decide to do a panel, or a couple of you or more than a couple of you talking about one subject, sort of, so you have different people's point of view, how's that going to work? Who should you pick? Should it be somebody with an opposite point of view on the topic? Should it be someone that complements what you have to say? How are you going to figure that out? And then once you do, if it's going to be more than just you in the podcast, I would say, that's where the 6 to 10 episodes really comes in handy, because even if you may have great rapport in real life, figuring out how it is to get comfortable while you're being recorded and still have that same rapport, have some great professional rapport while you're being recorded, is something that takes time in the saddle, really a few episodes to really gel and get the chemistry all going between everybody. So a couple things, if this is all a little bit too daunting, but you still want to jump into the podcasting realm, a couple things you could do. One is become a guest on other people's podcasts. There are tons of podcasts out there that are in the interview style. So they're always looking for guests every month or every week, every episode they do that. So what you could do is you yourself can go out and pitch these different podcasts to be a guest on their show. By now, there are podcast booking companies that can do that for you. You can hire them on a monthly basis, typically a subscription of a few months at least, and they will help you get your one sheet together, which is a sheet that they will send out to different podcasts in order to pitch you and to secure your spot on their podcast. The great thing about that is they usually take care of the back and forth, all the logistics, and you just have to show up and be a great guest. So there's a way to do that as well without having all the technical capabilities saddled with you, and the publishing schedules and the whole bit. The other thing could be is that you get together with a group of your peers and have those peers, each of you, take on something that's important for the podcast. That's how I've found some success with podcasting. I meet with a group of there's 4 other marketing consultants, and we meet weekly to do what we have here, the marketing guides for small business podcasts. So it's a weekly show, and each of us take turns being the host. So the host is always responsible for what the topic is that week and having the questions ready and briefed out to each of the other 4 members. And then that person acts as the host for that episode. What's really neat about that is the 4 other colleagues come to this marketing episode with different perspectives. They have different focuses for their business. So they're coming to give the audience sort of a different point of view. So you got 5 different points of view on certain topics, which can be very, very helpful depending on what industry you're in, where you come from. As well, with the 5 different people, we take turns and we have different responsibilities. Some have the financial responsibility to be paying for, the sound engineering and whatnot. Others of us have more activity responsibilities, actually loading the podcast up, promoting the podcast, that kind of thing. So it's been a really great way to participate in podcasting without having the heavy lifting of everything. So that can be a way that it can work for you as well. So in summary, podcasting is another channel to check out. It's not necessarily going to be the silver bullet, but it is something that can be doable. If you're really enthusiastic about it, I would say go for it. If you need any kind of a sounding board on it, what it really takes to get going, some of the pros and cons, I'm happy to have a conversation with you on that. And if you just are thinking, maybe I'll dip my toe in the water, not too sure, I would say go with the podcast booking scenario. Try yourself out on 3 or 4 podcasts, see how it really is, and then make your decision from there. So as always, thank you for tuning in, and best of luck if you decide to go the podcast route.